Hey everyone, welcome back to our Virtual Bites cooking program. This week we are making pizza. Now those of you who were with us in our live Zoom program last night, we did most of the preparation steps, so you can go on ahead and fast forward until the part where we're assembling the pizza. But for everyone else, we're going to start right from scratch on how to make the crust all the way to a finished product. Now first we're going to make our dough. So you're going to need a bowl and some type of a mixing spoon, spatula, doesn't really matter, something just to mix with. Okay, and our measuring cups and spoons. So we're gonna pull those over here. And because this session we're going in much more detail, nothing is pre-measured. So we're gonna measure out everything right now. The recipe for the video will be posted underneath the video on YouTube. Okay, so let's get started. First, we're gonna start with our flour. We're gonna make 2 1/3 cups of flour. So that is 2 1-cup measures and 1 1/3 cup measure. So I'm gonna stick that in. And like we talked last week, when we're baking, we wanna make sure that we've got a nice even level on top. We're making a dough, so that is considered baking. We wanna make sure we've got exact measurements or our dough might not turn out quite as nice. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a hole there, so we'll just fill that up. Put that in. So there's our 2 cups. And then we're going to make our 1/3. A little bit more in that one. Once we make this dough, it will need to sit for a little bit. And then once it rises, then we'll get into how to roll it all out. So we're going to prep this, put off to the side, and prep everything else. Okay, next we're going to put in our yeast. So right up here, come on up close, there we go. That is our yeast. That is what's going to give rise to our dough. So just take your packet and just kind of shake it down a little bit to open up. Sometimes at home, you might find that it's in a jar. You're gonna want about a tablespoon of yeast. So we're cheating and using this packet, but at home if you have a different, like bigger container, just put a tablespoon of yeast in there. Now we're gonna go ahead and give that a bit of a stir already. Start to just mix it up. Nothing's gonna happen, it just makes sure that we're all well mixed once we get to the next steps, okay? So next we're gonna add in our sugar. So we're not going to put very much in, about 1½ teaspoons. And you're probably wondering at home, why are we putting sugar in our pizza dough? We don't really want a sweet pizza dough happening. And what we're doing is we're actually adding in the sugar to activate the yeast. And this will help the yeast to work better and to make us a higher rise crust. So we've got 1½ teaspoons added in. We don't need a heck of a lot, just a little tiny bit. Just again, it's gonna work with that yeast once we add in our liquid ingredients. Next, we're gonna add in a little bit of salt, and this is just for enhanced flavor. And then we're gonna go ahead and add in our seasonings for the dough. We wanna have a little bit of flavor in our dough as well. Gives it a nice whole rounded pizza taste. Package open. So I'm going to put in, we don't need very much, just 1/4 teaspoon of Italian seasoning. A little bit more than 1/4 there, but that's okay. A little extra flavor. And we're going to put in 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. There we go. It was funny last night when we were making our live Zoom session with our dough, and a couple of kids said, "Oh, that smells so strong." Garlic has a very strong smell, but once we mix it up into the rest of our dough mixture here, or our flour, that smell will dissipate into the dough. It'll give us a nice flavor, but it won't be overpowering. Trust me on that one. So the kids said last night that once they were mixing up the dough, it smelled great. It no longer stank a little bit. So that's all of our dry ingredients into the mixture here. Next, we're going to add in some warm water and oil. Now, you want to make sure that you're using warm water because, again, that's going to help activate the yeast. If you're using a cold water, nothing's going to happen. The warm water needs to be mixed in here, and it'll make those yeast molecules kind of open up, give us that fluffier dough. So I've got my liquid measuring cup here, and I pre-boiled water earlier, so it's not hot, it's warm. And we're gonna put in 3/4 of a cup of warm water. And just like we talked about last week, I'm gonna measure from up here, and I'm gonna go crouch down, and I'm gonna double check. Oh man, I'm good today. I am right on the 3/4 of a cup line, right there. So move that so the camera can see that, and they've moved the camera down too, so that you get a really good angle on that. So that's our 3/4 of a cup of warm water. Now, into the warm water, we are going to add 2 tablespoons of oil. At home, get an adult to help you, especially if your container is large as mine, because we don't want to put in too much oil. So I'm going to measure very carefully. This is a very full jug. So we're going to put that into the hot water. 1 tablespoon and 2 tablespoons. Now, your recipe says plus 2 tablespoons. We're going to use those second 2 tablespoons once we've got our dough mixed up. And we're going to use that to coat it while it rests. So I'm going to use actually my measuring spoon, give it a little stir in there. And then I'm going to slowly add this into my dough mixture. You're going to notice at first that it might, the dough might seem a little sticky and maybe not mix up, and you might think, oh, we didn't add enough water. So right away you can see it's making these clumps, but it's not making like a wet dough. We don't want a wet dough. We're gonna work this, and the more we work it, the more that moisture from the water and the oil is going to adhere to the flour. And once we get it to maybe about 20-30 stirs, go ahead and put your hands in there, and you can start to actually shape it into more of a ball of dough. So I'm going to put that off to the side. And again, you can use a wooden spoon, a metal spoon, you can use a whisk, anything you'd like. And then I'm just going to go ahead and get my hands in there, and I'm going to start working the dough. So I want to get all of the little dough pieces up. So you can already tell it's only been about a minute, and our dough is already starting to come together. And the more we work that dough, the more we can incorporate all of the little bits of flour. If you find that your dough is really not coming together, maybe you had a miscalculation on how much flour you put in, or your flour, it's continually to crumble, you can add at a time 1 teaspoon of water, but do not add too much, because again, you can't take away from what you've put in, and you might end up with dough that doesn't look very nice. So, or that's not going to work, sorry. So just keep working at your dough. If you find that you need a little bit more water, you can add a little tiny bit more. And we're going to really start to knead our dough here. So I'm pushing in, waking up all of the glutens. That's going to help hold it together. Now, you might notice something about my dough here, is it does seem to be taking a little bit of time to kind of mix up together. And I'm making a bit of a special dough here. Now, everyone at home is using regular flour. This particular dough here is gluten-free. We don't have any gluten in this flour. So sometimes gluten-free flour can be a little bit more challenging to work with. One of our staff can't have gluten, so this particular pizza is going to be for her. But our demo, our next dough that we've got sitting from yesterday is a full gluten pizza. Gluten, yes, it's got full of gluten. So you're going to be able to see what the dough looks like in a finished product. This with the little bits here isn't normal for this dough. It is just because we're using gluten-free flour. So those of you going at home, your dough's not working. It is. It's just it has no gluten in it. So we do our best when we work with special and unique food and dietary restrictions. So your dough should look like a bit of a ball. So just like that. And again, mine doesn't have the gluten holding it together, but you're going to try to form it. And then you're going to put it in your bowl and take your last little tablespoon of oil, and you're going to drizzle that on top of the dough. Just like that, and we're just going to rub that into the dough. And then you're going to want to go ahead and cover that with saran wrap or with a towel. and then you're gonna stick it somewhere warm. Do not put it in your fridge, because the coolness of the fridge will actually stop the yeast from working. And what's gonna happen is this dough is going to sit, and it's gonna grow, and it's going to rise, and that's what's gonna give us more air pockets and a nice light crust. And last night after our dough had sat with the kids on the video, and they came back to it, it was all like, whoa, it grew bigger. And that's what the yeast is doing. So I'm gonna put this guy to the side over here. And this is the dough that we made last night in our live session. So it's been sitting and proofing, and it's gonna pop back a little bit here. So it's ready to be used. So we're gonna put that off to the side. I'm gonna go wash my hands and clean up my workspace to prepare for our toppings. Also at this time, please go ahead and turn your ovens on. You're gonna preheat those ovens to 450 degrees. We want it a little bit hotter than normal so we can get a nice crispy bottom of our crust. So I'm gonna wash my hands, get my oven turned on, and we'll see you soon. Hey guys, welcome back. So I've already started kind of getting some of our toppings ready. So we're gonna jump right in with that. So I'll put my olives off to the side because we don't have to do too much with those, and our pineapple. Now pizza. There are so many arguments around what goes on a pizza. Do we put pineapple on a pizza? Do we put anchovies on a pizza? Do we put olives on a pizza? Chicken, broccoli, who knows it? You can put whatever you'd like on your pizza. The most important part is getting a good crust, the tomato sauce, the cheese, and then whatever toppings you'd like. And hey, you don't even need tomato sauce. I've made pizza with Alfredo sauce, chicken, provolone, and spinach. That would have been a good one to do for this video, but we're gonna do a typical tomato sauce pizza. What we're gonna use here today in-house is pepperoni, ham, and green pepper. And we're gonna modify with adding a couple extra fun ingredients. And then the cheese we're gonna use today is regular old good mozzarella cheese. You wanna make sure that the cheese you're using has a good melt factor, so it's a bit of a softer cheese. If you use like a cheddar, especially an old cheddar, it's gonna crumble a little bit more, and it actually is gonna be fattier on your pizza. That's not to say you can't use it. If I do something like a cheeseburger pizza where I'm using ground beef and I want that flavor, I'm gonna mix it in with my mozzarella, because that mozzarella is what's going to give us that nice like stringy pizza quality. So we've talked about this many times before, how to use the grater. So again, our dominant hand is gonna hold the top of the grater, and we want to use the side with the bigger holes on it, right up here. And never erase when we're working with knives, graters, because we don't want to hurt ourselves. We're gonna start at the top, and we're just gonna come down. Right, back and forth, just like this. Last week we were grating with our carrot, and you can grate any vegetable pretty much with a cheese grater. When I make hash browns, I use my grater to get a really nice fine cut on my potatoes. I've done it with different vegetables to make little fritters. So you can use your grater, even though we normally say cheese grater. It's quite versatile, and we can use it on many different things. So your recipe does call for about 2 cups of grated cheese, and that's personal preference if you like lots of cheese or a little bit of cheese. And I've got some cheese grated already from earlier. Just to help us speed that process along a little bit. So we're gonna dump that in there. If you do pre-grate your cheese, so say you wanna prep everything Friday night to make a nice supper on Saturday, just make sure that you do put it in some form of plastic in the bowl covered with saran wrap or in a baggie. Because if you put it straight in the fridge like this, it's gonna dry out. That nice moisture that's in there that gives us that pull, it's gonna dry out and it will do nothing for you in the oven. So we definitely don't want that. So go ahead and cut up the rest of that piece of cheese. I'm gonna finish that a bit later. And we're gonna go into prepping our vegetables. So peppers, again, this is a sweet green pepper. There's no spice in here. I like using these on a pizza. You can go ahead and, you know, add in anything you'd like. Staff last night were talking how they really enjoyed banana peppers and getting that spice on there. And I like the combination of ham and pineapple and spicy peppers. So we're gonna cut, I've already washed this, so make sure you wash that, take off any stickers. we're gonna cut off the top of our pepper. We always wanna cut on a surface that's not rolly. So if I'm on this side, I'm gonna be a little bit more rolly. If I'm on this side, I'm gonna roll. So what I've done is I've created a very stable workspace for myself. Next, we're gonna take our claw, and everyone from the virtual program last night, we talked about the claw, and we use this when we're holding and cutting. Because if my fingers are holding the pepper like this, there's a really good chance that I could get hurt. But if I'm using the claw method, my knife is gonna come down, and I'm never actually gonna cut my fingers because that knuckle is gonna act as a bit of a barrier. So our nubs on our pepper kind of act as a bit of a guideline. So I'm gonna take my knife, got my claw here, I'm gonna take my knife and just follow along that nub. So there's one cut here. Again, there's many different ways of cutting peppers. Different chefs have different things that they like to do. I like to do it this way because I find it gives me the least amount of mess. If you're looking for rings, then you can cut your pepper in half again and you can make slices that way. But we're gonna come down, and I really like this technique. And everything is kept in that inside core. The pith, that's the white part. We don't eat that anyways because it doesn't have a nice flavor to it. So we've put that aside, and we have 4 really nice pieces of pepper to work with. And then from here, we're just gonna give slices. So again, it's a little wobbly, so I'm gonna cut the top of that off there, and I'm gonna just cut this little side off, and now I've got a less wobbly piece to work with. I'm gonna use my claw and grab the side here. And again, and you want to put the tip of your knife down and you want to pull straight through. With a blade like this, you don't need to saw back and forth. You're not going to get anything out of it. Those types of blades are for cutting bread where you need something to bite in. This is barely need to use that knife, and I'm just using the tip and just pulling straight through. If you find that this isn't working for you and your knife is getting stuck, you might have a bit of a dull knife blade. And I'm going relatively thin because we don't cook our pizza for a long time. So we want it to be thin so it's gonna cook a little bit. If I put this whole hunk on there, it would probably be exactly the same after we cooked our pizza. So I'm just gonna do a few more slices here. And your recipe calls for pepper. You can use as much or as little as you want. So we've got our bits of pepper there. I'm gonna slice those up a little bit later for our pizza topping. So that's our peppers. And then you can do vegetarian pizzas, but I like meat on my pizza. I love having meat lover pizzas. So I've got my piece of pepperoni here. And pepperoni comes in many different ways. You can buy it pre-sliced. Here at Boys and Girls Club, we buy a big piece of it because we go through a lot of pepperoni with our kids. Next week, the kids that are here are going to be making their own pizza bagels. So there's different ways that you can even have pizza. You can put pizza toast, pizza bagels, pizza on tortillas. You can have different crust as well. So we're gonna put that to the side. If you have a bigger piece of pepperoni that's not pre-sliced, sometimes what you have is something called a casing, and that's this piece right here. And that's what holds the meat together when they're creating the pepperoni. This is not edible. You don't want to eat this. So let's make sure we throw that away if your pepperoni has it. And then again, I'm not going to want to cut my slices like this because it's a pretty wobbly surface. So I'm going to cut my pepperoni in half. And for my liking, I'm going to cut it into quarters. And then from there, I've got an easier piece of pepperoni to work with. And I can slice like this down. Or if that's still a little bit too small of a surface area to cut, just leave your pepperoni on the side. And then your knife cuts through less of a surface. And there's less chance of you getting hurt or your food moving around. See, it goes a lot faster when I've got that surface area a little bit smaller to work with. So I've got nice pepperonis, and I'm just gonna do that with this one as well. And I've got my claw out, so my fingers are protected by the knife, and I'm just pulling that knife right straight through. So I've got my pepperoni there. And because I've got pineapple, you can't have pineapple without ham. And so we're gonna pull out some slices. We're using pre-sliced deli ham here. You can use a chunk of ham. You can use whatever you'd like. And again, these are just suggestions on what we're using here. Go ahead and put anything you'd like on your pizza. And I'm, again, the tip of that knife go straight through that way. And then we're just going to turn it around. And the tip of the knife is going to come through this way. So, very, very quick and easy. I've got my ham ready to go, my pepperoni, I've got my peppers, I've got my pineapple and olives. And I might do half of the pizza with one thing and half the pizza with the other. You can do that as well. So, all of this is prepped and ready to go on our dough. We're gonna come on over here to where we have our dough that's proofed from earlier. So my gluten-free, my sad little gluten-free one is over there. It still needs some time to rise. This is one that we made last night in our cooking program. We're gonna use regular old baking sheets here. If you have a pizza, a round pizza one, you can form your crust to fit in the circle. We're gonna put, there we go. We are gonna put parchment paper on our pans, just so that our crust doesn't bake and stick onto our pan. Some people like to put cornmeal down as a base. That's fine too, whatever works best for your preference. And don't forget to make sure your oven is preheated, because that'll take a few minutes to heat up, especially at the higher temperature. So we're gonna have one pan ready to go. I'm gonna take a little bit of flour, and I'm gonna put flour on my table. Before you put flour on your table, make sure you wash it, because we're going to be working with the dough on the surface of the table. So we don't want to have a dirty table that's going to go into our food. And the reason we're putting flour down is it's going to have the dough stick less to the table. It's going to act as a bit of a barrier, get worked into the dough. And you can put some on your hands as well. So we've got our dough here, and we're going to just knead it up a little bit. It is a little stiff because it did sit last night. So I'm just going to kind of wake it up a little bit. And you can see it's a really nice, smooth dough. You can see right up in here, there's our spices that are all blended nicely through the dough. And I'm going to actually cut this dough in half, I think. Now, if you're feeling strong enough, you can work your dough out with your hands, or it doesn't call for it in your equipment, but you can use a rolling pin, and that's going to help give that extra bit of muscle that your dough is going to need to thin out. So you can see already, and I like to turn it. It keeps it more level. Make sure that there's flour equally coating on both sides. If you are having some difficulties with it sticking, then go ahead and add a little bit more flour. Not too much though. And then I'm just using my fingers to stretch out my dough a little bit. This one is a bit tough because it did sit in the fridge, so it's still a little cold. We're gonna roll that dough out. Okay. So I'm gonna keep rolling this dough, and we'll take a few minutes, and then we'll come back and add the toppings to our crust. See you in a bit. Okay, so we're all ready to go to assemble our pizzas. But before we put our toppings on, there's one more step that we have to do with our crust. What we're gonna do is we're gonna poke little holes in it. And this is so that we don't get any air pockets while we're cooking. Because, I mean, you've probably had a pizza at home where it comes in, you're super excited, and you open it up, and it's got all these big, bumps in it, and you bite into it, and it's just full of air, and you don't get your cheese and your toppings, and it's no fun. So, we're gonna use our handy dandy fork, and we're just gonna lightly just tap. Now, we don't wanna go all the way through. We're just doing this so that the air can be released in the cooking process. You might have seen on some cooking shows that chefs will even use their fingers and make little dimple holes. Because our dough, I've gotten our dough quite thin, and it still is a little cold from yesterday, I'm gonna use the fork method. And again, we're not looking to make gigantic holes, just a little bit to let that air release as it's cooking. Okay, put that off to the side. And then we're gonna get our sauce here. Now, your recipe calls for about 1/4 cup of sauce. That's a general idea. Some people like a little less sauce in their pizza, some people like more. So instead of the 1/4 cup measure, I'm gonna use just my regular old tablespoon. I'm gonna put a dollop in the middle, and then I'm gonna spread out from the middle. Okay, and I wanna go pretty close to the edge because I wanna have full flavor in all my pizza. And this is just a regular tomato sauce, and I added in a little extra parsley. We had some extra kicking around here, so just for some more flavor. Some people like to add Parmesan cheese into their sauce as well. We're not going to do that today because we've got lots of mozzarella cheese. So we're just going to evenly coat both of those pizzas. And I want to make sure I don't get too much sauce in one spot. That looks pretty good. We don't want to over sauce our pizzas. I like to taste my toppings more so than the tomato sauce. So just a little bit like that. And then we're going to take our cheese and just grab a little handful and just sprinkle some of that cheese on there. I like to put cheese on the bottom because then everything melts into it. Some people like to put cheese at the top on the end and it seals in the cheese. Whatever your preference is. Traditionally, we do put the cheese on the bottom first. And if you didn't want any other toppings, once this is done with the cheese, you could just go ahead and pop that into the oven. But we're gonna add some of our toppings that we worked so hard to cut and get ready. And just, you know, place them out and in an evenly spaced fashion. We don't wanna put too much in one spot because it won't cook down. And we do want pizza to cook. So this pizza here, I'm gonna do with the pepperonis, the green peppers, and the olives. And then on the other pizza, I'm gonna do a more traditional Hawaiian style with just the ham and the pepperoni, or sorry, the ham and the pineapple. I say pepperoni because that's what I'm holding in my hand right now. So we've got a pretty good even layer of pepperoni. We want every bite to have some pepperoni on it. And then we're gonna take our peppers that we have sliced pretty thin, and I'm just gonna go around in a little bit of a pattern here. This way, every piece that we cut should have a taste of that green pepper on it. And if you don't use everything that you cut to prepare for your pizza, all of our toppings are, you know, usually pre-cooked, or if they're raw veggies. I've got myself a little pile here for snack for later. And then finally, we're gonna come in with our olives. These are just canned olives that I have gone through and sliced up a little bit, except for that one. You can also buy pre-sliced olives. You can use green or black. Again, whatever your topping preference is. When I was a kid, I hated olives. If they were on my pizza, I would not eat my pizza, or I would have to sit there and pick every little piece of olive off. And now as an adult, I really like olives. So it's become one of my favorite foods that I like to use for mixing in for like that extra briny flavor. And then I'm gonna go ahead here and just because I can, I'm gonna sprinkle just a little bit of cheese just on top, just to kind of meld all of that together. Okay, so this is ready. It's gonna go into the oven. We are going to bake it according to our recipe for 13 to 15 minutes. We wanna wait until the cheese is all melted and our crust, from what we can see, is a little golden brown. So when you go into your oven, it is preheated, so it's gonna be hot. So make sure you've got your oven mitts and an adult supervising you going into the oven. So come on over here. We've got our oven heated to 450 degrees. I'm gonna put on my handy dandy oven mitts. Open that up, and we're just gonna slide that pizza right in. I'm going for the middle rack because that's gonna give me closer to the heat and it's not gonna burn the bottom, but it's also not gonna be too far away. Close that up and put our timer on. I'm gonna do 13 minutes and then I'm gonna take a look at it after. And when we're cooking with the oven, don't forget, every time we open the oven, we're letting out the heat. So if we wanna check how our pizza progress is going, most ovens have a light switch on them. So I can put that light on, and then now you can see in there that we've got a light. So I'm gonna finish up, I'm gonna make the other Hawaiian pizza, I'm gonna pop that in, and we'll see you soon in about 13 to 15 minutes. Okay, so our pizzas have been out of the oven and they've been resting for a few minutes. You wanna make sure that you give them about 5 minutes to rest. One, so they're a little bit easier to manage, but two, so that the cheese has a chance to just kind of solidify a little bit so it doesn't go sliding off. Now, normally Dave is filming behind the camera, but we're filming at a different time today and he's not here yet. So Jess has been behind camera all morning And she is, since she's stepped in at the last moment to help us out, she is going to pick what pizza she'd like to try. And she can have first bite today.
That one.
Okay, so if you have a pizza cutter at home, you can use a pizza cutter and just roll through nicely. Apparently, we don't have a pizza cutter at Boys and Girls Club, so Albert, if you're watching this, we need a pizza cutter. So we're going to use our butcher knife for right now, and we're just going to come through, and we're just going to try to do this in one big cut. Oh, you can see the steam coming off of it. We had a nice solid crunch sound. This is our little one, so I don't know if I'm going to get triangles super good here. And Jess, you might want to wait just a little second there before grabbing that slice of pizza. But definitely getting the sound we want to hear from our crust. The cheese is all melted. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to just get this one cut up. The staff are going to enjoy having some pizza snack when they get in today. And it's such a simple thing to make, and so versatile with whatever you'd like. And that crust, you know, it turned out pretty good. It's, you can see the herbs in it. Oh, that cutting job was not the greatest, but there we go. It doesn't have to be perfect. So there we go. Jess, I'm going to pass you one of those. You want to grab that and give it a try. Let us know how it tastes.
It's really good.
Nice. Awesome. So thanks for joining us again this week. Next week we are going to be making taco salad. And for those of you people out there who, I'm not a salad person, I don't like salad, my taco salad has Dorito chips in it. So it's pretty darn good. The week after that, I'm hoping to have a special guest, but I'm not going to say any more about that other than I have had to send a letter up far north to see if I'll get a special guest with me. So stay tuned to next week, and have a great week. Bye.